So Kathy Nessett, who the senator met on the way out today of Nessett Consulting, is world-renowned in her knowledge of what's happening in the Bakken, and she's going to give us just a little bit of a quick briefing, and then we're going to chat. Ryan will get a kick out of this because some folks from the American Petroleum Association came out one day, Senator, and they said, could you put together some people in a room in Fargo because we want to have a salon? I said, a salon? I'm not familiar with a salon. Is that get my hair done? Or they said, no, you put these people in the room and they brief and you talk about, I said, we call that shooting the bull. So we'll shoot the bull in a second here and just talk about what's happening here, but Kathy, if you would.
Thank you very much, Scott. I'm going to follow up before I get started here and gift our senator with some pieces to go along with that crude oil. I have some pieces of core of the Bakken that are in this parcel here, and I'll go through and explain what they are, but that is actual Bakken rock from about 10,000 feet below the surface of North Dakota's prairie. And that can go right in the White House along with that.
You guys are decorating the White House.
North Dakota style. Well, my presentation is going to be very brief. What I want to do is I just want to explain a little bit, Senator and all the rest of our group here, the basic geology of the Bakken Formation, how we drill these horizontally, and how we fracture stimulate them. Quick 5 minutes, we'll run through this. This is a map. Can I have one of you guys up here run the projector for me? This is a map of North Dakota, and as you can see, on the western side of the state is where the oil activity is. Those green derricks represent all the drilling rigs out there. Currently today, Ron? 202 rigs actively drilling in North Dakota as of today. Okay, the stratigraphic column. This is a column that depicts the North Dakota geology. The reason I want to point this out is the Bakken Formation is down here, pointed down at about 10,000 feet of true vertical depth. It's very important that we know where our water aquifers are. You can see at the top of this map, called the stratigraphic column, is where our water aquifers are. They're within the first 2,000 feet. The important thing to remember, water aquifers at 2,000, Bakken at 10,000. This is special. This is why North Dakota is so special. We have 8,000 feet of overburdened rock protecting our surface aquifers, where we go ahead and do our fracking technology. The stratigraphy of the Bakken Formation, as the samples that you have there, Senator, the top zone is the Upper Bakken Shale. Most of you guys have seen this. You're sure welcome to take a look later. This is the source. This is where the oil comes out of. The second, the middle is rock that looks like this. This is Middle Bakken, and this is actually what we target. Now, this is what the rock looks like if we drill horizontally in that. You look at that and you're going to say, there's not a chance that there's oil in that rock. And yet, if we put that underneath a fluoroscope, an ultraviolet light, it actually will fluoresce and it has oil in it. The next layer down is the Lower Bakken. Looks very similar to that Upper Bakken shale. This is also a source of the oil. So these are the source rock. That is the target or the reservoir that we drill in. The next zone down is the Sanish Formation, and it is all part of the Bakken system, and the Sanish looks very similar. Low porosity, low permeability. So this is rock. This is what's called an unconventional reservoir. That means low porosity, there's few holes in it, low permeability. Those holes are not connected. The only way to make this work is to drill horizontally, and that's what we're doing. How do we do it? We use mud motors. Someone asked if I was going to have my little tricky straw with me. I use my straw to help determine or to show how a mud motor works. We drill vertically down through the uphole formations to about 500 feet above our target Bakken. It's called kickoff point. Strip all the pipe out of the hole. We pick up a mud motor that has, the important part is the bent sub. The bent sub then makes your assembly, so it has a little bend to it. And when we drill our curve, you're pushing the pipe down the hole and building angle at about 10 degrees per 100. The only thing turning is the bit at the end of this bottom hole assembly. So in this picture here, that bend sub is a key component. We push the pipe, we build our curve, about 10 to 12 degrees per 100 until we land in the middle Bakken at about 10,000 feet below the surface. So about 2 miles down, we now set a casing straight. Once we have the horizontal well drilled out, we go down about 2 miles, we go about two miles sideways. So the full measured depth of these wells is about 20,000 feet. 2 miles down, 2 miles sideways, then we frack them in stages. And I'm going to show a very short video, it takes about 30 seconds, and it'll describe what the fracture technology is. Oh, you want to do that?
An electrical current is sent down the wire line to the perf gun and sets off a charge that shoots small holes through the casing and cement and out a short distance into the shale formation. The perf gun is then pulled out of the hole. Next, because the shale is tight or compressed, the well will have to be fracked. Known as hydraulic fracturing, this is a process where water, sand, and additives are pumped into the wellbore and down the casing under extremely high pressure. As the mixture is forced out through the perforations and into the surrounding rock, the pressure causes the shale to fracture. This creates a fairway connecting the reservoir to the well and allows the released gas to flow to the wellbore. Next, a temporary plug is placed at the heel or left side of the first stage frac. The plug closes off or isolates the perforated and fracked section of the wellbore so that the second stage section of the horizontal leg can be perforated and fracked. Tight reservoirs do not contain natural fractures and therefore cannot be produced economically without hydraulic fracturing.
This is what makes Bakken so special. 10,000 feet down, 10,000 feet sideways, fracture stimulated. The technology is what's caught up with this oil field. I thank you for your attention. I hand things over to Scott and our senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Very good presentation. What are we going to do? Ron Nassau, Petroleum Association, first question. Any other issue? Yes.
Well, Senator, I think Kathy Nesset is just a prime example of what North Dakota has really accomplished through all of its energy production and agriculture, a small business that now, Kathy, you're employing how many people today?
About 200.
200 people, and 6 years ago you were employing?
Two. Myself and my husband.
That pretty much tells the story of economics and jobs creation. We've got a lot of challenges in the Bakken, and along with opportunities come challenges. But one of the things you said is best: if the federal government stays out of our way, North Dakota will do this right. We will produce more American energy. We will take care of we have the resources to take care of our challenges. But one of the two things that our oil and gas head regulator says threatens the Bakken is really a price collapse in the oil and gas price, the oil price essentially. But secondly is the federal government and overreach by federal agencies. And I think that's the question that industry would have. We are just being pounded with new regulations, and we need resources. And that's my question: is what as president would you do to help industries of all types alleviate them of this concern?
Well, I'm a believer that this administration has been well, it's not a believer, it's a fact. This administration has been the most burdensome, costly regulatory administration in the history of the country. Okay. And then if you look at just objectively over the last two administrations, under Clinton and Bush, they averaged about 60 regulations a year that cost business over $100 million a year. Just last year alone, President Obama's administration put in 150 regulations that cost over $100 million a year. And he's scheduled to do even more this year. I mean, we've seen an absolute explosion of government micromanaging the business community. And of course, you have some from Dodd-Frank, you have some from Obamacare, but the ones that have really exploded are the EPA. I mean, EPA has just gone crazy. And we've seen it. I know the folks here from the coal industry who, the Clean Air Regulation just went into effect that has shut down at least 6 coal-fired power plants, 500 people out of work already. And there are estimates that maybe as many as 60 over the long haul that could be shut down as a result of these regs. What I've said is that as president, I'll come in and take every one of those regulations that Obama's put in place, and I will repeal or replace them. And some will, like the one I just mentioned, will repeal. Because many of these regulations are not as a result of new laws, but they're reinterpretations of existing law and existing regs. Some of them aren't even regs; they're just interpretations of regs. And so, what we really need, the easy part in some respects is getting the president coming in with new personnel and with an idea that we're going to change, with new sheriff in town, and we're going to change the way we're going to enforce the law, and we're going to change the way that we interpret the law. That's, in some respects, the easy part, which I think you'll see an immediate change in the attitude. I believe, as you do, that people at the local and state level care as much, and certainly more, about their land and their water and their air than people in Washington, D.C. who don't live in northwest North Dakota. And that we need to trust people to do things the correct way, and we need to have guidelines to do it, and we have to have enforcement. But we have to give folks the ability and the flexibility to go out there and do their job. I always say that if you do things right and you don't pollute the air beyond the standards that are set forth, you don't do the same thing with any other environmental thing, I'm going to be your best friend. And if you guys screw up, then you're going to get nailed. But that's the way it should be. And that what we need to do is respect the states, the locals, the business people, and give them a compliance-oriented type of approach as opposed to a punitive-oriented approach and a micromanagement of the affairs of business. And I think you'll find a Santorum administration that will be very, very good to work with.
With a lot of nice stuff in the White House.
With nice stuff in the White House.
To remind you of this trip in Tioga, North Dakota. Tom Belzer's next. Tom is the Executive Vice President of North Dakota Motor Carriers Association. You saw a lot of the impact of the trucks and in a busy industry right now. Tom, go ahead.
As everyone is well aware, that infrastructure is of the highest priority in the state right now. In fact, North Dakota, in the last budget cycle, committed over half of $1 billion of our state resources towards infrastructure. And as you know, the House and the Senate are working on the transportation bill as we speak. What do you feel is the role of the federal government in transportation?
I've been through a lot of transportation bills, and Pennsylvania has been a state that you'll see has actually done very well under transportation bills because we're a pass-through state. We call it the Keystone State for a reason. We sort of connect New England to the rest of the 48, and so we have actually more roads in Pennsylvania than they do in all New York, New Jersey, and New England combined. I mean, we have an amazing network of roads in Pennsylvania, but we get a lot of cross traffic. So I've always focused, and I believe the federal government's role should be to focus on major highways and for the purposes of interstate commerce. That's what the federal government's role should be. That's not what the federal government has devolved into. We get into bike paths, we get into all sorts of other things that, in my opinion, that's not the federal role in transportation. It's for interstate commerce. And so what I will try to do as president is orient our transportation dollars more for those types of projects of moving goods and commerce in between the states, not local community projects. And and as we've seen, I mean, I don't know what the percentage we're digging into this is used in things that are really not interstate commerce related. But to the extent that we can move the federal transportation funds out of that area, leave that to the state and local governments to do. But that, as you know, I mean, there's an enormous amount of pressure from local communities to get a little bit of federal money to make it easier for them to afford some of their local projects. That's just not what federal dollars will be used for, and I'll work very hard to make sure that they're used for the purposes of promoting commerce, not quality of life initiatives within communities.
Senator, there's a little town to the east here called Stanley, North Dakota. Stanley's the big brother to Tioga, just a little bit down to the east. And there was a guy that walked into a pizza shop that was being run by this guy over here in the yellow tie, Dennis Lindahl, Joe's Pizza. And a guy from Minneapolis that was a developer, developed commercial real estate down there, and happened to hear what the heck's going on in this Bakken. So he literally got in a car and drove up all night one night, ends up at Joe's Pizza in Stanley, North Dakota, and sits down and says, tell me what's going on, what do you need? This guy here says, we need more houses, and quick. This guy over here says, get me a napkin. And right now, Dean DeValis, Annabelle Holmes, tell the Senator what's happening in Stanley and Tioga and throughout this entire region.
Senator, thank you, Scott, very much. The reason why it's happening here is because of North Dakota. It's not that I'm so brilliant, it's that North Dakota is so brilliant. They have developed a government that actually asks, how can I help you? I'm from Minnesota, where the question would be, why are you here? And that's a huge difference. What I've accomplished here with the communities, in terms of Stanley, Tioga, the ones built, the others under construction, is I've been able to do this in 1 year, which would have taken me 10 years back home. And I mean that sincerely. And there's something very special about what the state has developed. And the one charge I want to give you is learn from this. And please take it forth on a campaign trail. This is a state where government actually works with you as opposed to against you. They want you to succeed and they cheer you on and they pick you up and you follow. This is a very rare trait. For some reason I'm fearful seeing the meeting here. They'll just be exposed, the world will be lost. So I just want to say that, thank you for coming. But learn and preserve and present what North Dakota is really giving the world.
Well, it really goes down to sort of the basic theme of my campaign, which is, do you believe in free people who are, I believe, basically good, decent, and moral people who want the best for themselves, their family, their community, and their country? Do you believe them and give them the freedom, the opportunity to build something from the bottom up? Or do you believe in the elites of our culture to come in and dictate to you how to run things? And that's really the fundamental difference between Minnesota and North Dakota. In Minnesota and in some of the more progressive states, they believe in the power of the government and the goodness of the government to make these decisions for average, ordinary people who they believe are simply out of their league and don't have the expertise or the good intentions that the folks in government have. And I just fundamentally reject that. That our founders fundamentally rejected. I mean, our country has rejected that for 200 years, but we are now we're now on the precipice of that occurring not just in the area of Minnesota, but in the country, of where we are going to cede so much power and authority over the government that they are going to be micromanaging everything in our country.
All right, would you pass the microphone down to David Straley? If you would there, David. Dean mentioned, by the way, Dean, do you still have the napkin? You still have the napkin. Still. That it all started. They're building homes in Stanley and Tioga and Columbus. It's really neat to see. We'll show you on the bus later, but we're going to stop at the Tioga development on the way to the high school today. North Dakota gets a lot of attention, as Dean mentioned, because of oil, obviously. We're worldwide attention now. His phone rings off the hook. International media want to come see it. Show us the rig. What's happening? What's this fracking? What's going on? But North Dakota's been on the energy map for a long time. And coal is a good reason why. David Straley represents North American coal. There's over an 800-year supply of economically recoverable coal. We're not going to teach you anything about coal today because you're from the great state of Pennsylvania. But David, go ahead.
Senator, first of all, thanks for coming here today. I know your history with coal. I really appreciate your past leadership, specifically not only on coal issues, but also on other energy issues when you served in the Senate. You helped us, our industry, many other folks on your leadership, so I thank you for that, first of all. As you see, you arrive in North Dakota and you see our clean air, and you get to drink our clean water. It's a fantastic place. I think we've summed it up nicely. I've read your 12, 13-part tax plan. I think it's actually fantastic. It's short, it's quick, it's easy. There's one thing from a business standpoint that we've got, and that is uncertainty. Whether it be the regulations, whether it be the National Labor Relations Board, it's constant new rules or a gerrymandering of the current rules to give new interpretation. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you can do as an administrator to provide that certainty for the business community, not only North Dakota, but across these other states that you will lead.
I hear that all the time. I mean, from businesses one corner of the country to another, that one of the reasons that people are hesitant to invest, hesitant to grow their business, is the level of hostility and the uncertainty that comes from that, from this administration. Obviously, the implementation of Obamacare, we're already seeing, there are 700 cases in Obamacare where the provision says the secretary shall. So it creates all sorts of uncertainty because, as you saw from just these regulations that everybody's been screaming about with respect to the Catholic Church, that's just one of hundreds of interpretations that are coming down the line on Obamacare. We have the same thing going on in the financial services sector with Dodd-Frank. Literally, hundreds of regulations, hundreds of interpretations of the law, all of which can have a huge impact on someone's willingness or desire or ability to lend money or to provide or to grow their business. I know there are businesses out there that are saying, well, I can't get above 50 employees or have 53 employees and want to get under 50 because they're going to be forced to comply with Obamacare if they grow. So there's all sorts of things out there. You have a whole raft of taxes that are on the way. And our feeling is obviously we want to repeal Obamacare. We want to take Dodd-Frank and from my perspective, gut most of it, if not all of it, and say to the business community, look, we want to be your friend. We want to work together. We want to create an atmosphere of certainty. We will get rid of a lot of these onerous regulations, and we will work with you to rewrite the ones that are necessary to have on the books, but do it in a way that you can feel comfortable that this is not an attempt for the government to micromanage how you do your job.
Jeff Zarling is here from Dawa Group, and the Solutions Group is putting on an investor conference I'd love for you to tell them about, because Ron Ness says all the time, said today from the studios of KTGO Radio in the metropolis of Tioga, North Dakota, that I'm happy to be a part of and on the air every day. He said, Scott, we need more of everything here. And that's why you're so important to be here today, Senator, to take this voice to other people, because we do need more of everything. We've got a lot of companies in every corner of North Dakota that are happening. You've got a Minnesota company that's happening, but we need them all. We need them all from corner to corner. And Jeff's done a nice job of kind of correlating that and attracting people to come. So tell the Senator about that if you would.
Well, thanks, Scott. My comments actually dovetail on a lot of what you just talked about. Obviously, there's a lot of economic activity taking place here. I talked with Tom Ralstead, economic developer from Williston, and I had published something saying, there's easily looking at their Williston Wire, you can come up with $4 billion worth of investment. Well, then the big three come out with $4 billion in capex spending alone. And he says, well, you better start talking about $40 billion in capital being invested here. So we have a tremendous amount of opportunity, which brings with it a tremendous amount of challenges. And what we're trying to provide is environments where we can get the private sector to help solve those problems. I mean, a lot of people tend to look at, in the commentary in the paper, we hear, why isn't the city doing this, and why isn't the city doing that? Well, the city doesn't build houses. Home builders build houses. Developers develop land. Builders build houses, and they sell them to people. And the communities are working hard to build infrastructure. The state has stepped up and helped them with that. But what we've done is put together the Bakken Investor Conference and the Housing Summit to create environments where more people can come and take a look at this and invest and solve these problems from a commercial perspective. But the number one question we get asked is, how long is this going to last? That's when you look at the risk factors. There's the price of oil, there's takeaway capacity, there's labor availability, there's the cost of services. And all of those are factors that are evaluated, and there's solutions that are coming to that people are coming up with, rail, pipeline, etc. But the one risk factor that people talk about is the possible moratorium on hydraulic fracturing. What Kathy shared with us this morning is the key to developing this resource. I mean, you've talked about, Harold Ham, you've talked about this being a resource play. This isn't as much about the geology and the drilling technology and the services as much as it's about the fracking technology and that risk. So with that uncertainty, that is what causes us some problems, because as they look to invest, we're talking about invest the other day with $150 million. They came in, they said, where do we put this? And they said, how long is it going to last? And it used to be 4 years ago, you could say a moratorium on fracturing,
what's the possibility of that? Well, it's possible, but what's the probability? And the probability was very, very low in everybody's mind. But when we saw what happened with the health care bill, whether you agree with it or not, it created a difference in that probability factor, and it increased it tenfold and created more uncertainty. And that's why we see, and how it affects us, as investors are wanting a 3 or 2 year return on capital. Because they don't want that uncertainty to go out 5, 10, 15 years. So we have hotel developers building hotels that aren't hotels. They're leased out. We have no overnight rooms, so we can't bring people in.
I know. We couldn't come in here because we couldn't find a place to stay. We had to stay in Boise.
Exactly, and that's what's created by the uncertainty of quite frankly, the fracking is a big fear. And we used to be able to say, well, that's not. The probability is low.
Mike and Dave go up next because I want to go to that, but certainly as far as the banking world is concerned, go ahead, Senator.
Well, a couple of things. First off, with respect to hydraulic fracturing, obviously I'm familiar with that from my experience in Pennsylvania. This is not a brand new technology. I mean, this is something that's been around a long time. There are hundreds of thousands of wells that have been that this technology has been used on. And what I think you're seeing is, I'm sure you know this. I mean, this is just the politics of the environmental groups, and you're disadvantaged not because of what's going on here. I believe this is my take on it. I think you're disadvantaged because we're seeing a lot of hydrofracking in Pennsylvania, and it's now closer to the East Coast. It's closer to the population centers where the radical environmentalists can gin up all sorts of scary stories about what's going to happen to people in Philadelphia and New York and the surrounding suburban and exurban communities there, because it is happening so proximate to them that, with the decline of the fury about man-made global warming, the environmental groups have to find another whipping boy. And that's all this is. In my opinion, that's all this is. If the global warming scare had kept on, they'd have forgotten about you folks. But now that is, we found that that's not climate science, that it was political science. That they're now off to how can we raise money to promote our cause, so we can get resources, so we can get more people elected to control the environment from the government down. And unfortunately, now we have all of this activity going on in Pennsylvania, and occasionally you have a bad operator, occasionally you have somebody that does things that cause a problem, and that's all the news. And so what you have to realize is that personnel is policy, and if you put in place, if Barack Obama is reelected, which I'm sure there's no chance of that here in the state of North Dakota. Anybody agree? Yeah. But the bottom line is, we've got to change the president. If you don't change the president, this is going to come. Not only because it's just you won't be able to help himself.
So how do you do that, Senator? I mean, I think that's everybody around this room could tell you a story about people saying, insurance company not sure they want to do it. We've got some here. How do you take on the uncertainty? Because the uncertainty is the federal government. It's the EPA.
The uncertainty is the President of the United States. Let's just boil it down. Under a Santorum administration, this is not a concern. It just won't be. But under his administration, it will be, and it won't be because of science. It'll be because of politics. And I understand that doesn't give a lot of comfort, I'm sure, to people here, but. Obviously, this president, look, we all know, I mean, you got Alaska, who probably within 10 years, we're going to lose that pipeline because they're not going to have enough flow in it to keep it going. Mexico is, you're seeing, they're out there trying to do things with deep water drilling. They're going to, within 5 years, they're going to probably be a net importer of oil, not an exporter. That's 1.5 million barrels a day, 500,000 barrels from Alaska. You got Chavez in Venezuela, with 2.5 million barrels coming to this country. And as you know, China's building a refinery down there. That's going to stop. So we've got, 4 or 5 million barrels that we got to replace. And this president, what does he do? He shuts down the Keystone Pipeline. I mean, this is not a rational energy policy. He goes and talks about how energy, oil production has gone up. I mean, in spite of him, not because of him. But yet, he's doing nothing to plan for the future of even less oil availability in this country. And you can make up some of it here, but you can't even make up all we're going to lose unless we, open up ANWR and feed more into that pipeline.
Seems to me, I just want to briefly ask about the State of the Union address, because he got up the State of the Union and says, under my administration, oil and gas production is up. And we have to do what you just did, correctly say, yeah, but public lands, it's down 40%, and that's what you do control. And yeah, but no, you're trying to stop it. And that's, in this environment, with all our friends in the mainstream media, as the Rush calls them, the drive-bys, it's a soundbite. How do you take that to the American people and say, he says it's gone up, which it has, but no thanks to him, without it just being in the weeds?
Well, I think, you have to at some level trust the American people that they can get beyond the 10 second, in his case, 10-second soundbite and look at the reality of what's going on in energy. And I think I just laid that out in about 30 seconds to a minute, that the president is going to dramatically increase our dependency on foreign oil. And when I say foreign oil, I don't mean Canadian oil, I mean OPEC oil. And that is going to be very, very clear. One of the reasons our dependency on foreign oil hasn't exploded is because the economy stinks, and we're not using as much energy. Well, that is going to change, I hope, one way or another. As in spite of the headwind that Obama's put in place, this economy seems to be starting to grow a little bit. You're going to see huge spikes in energy prices, which is great for you folks, but it's really bad for our economy and our country.
If my wife was here, she'd say, it's not about you, it's not a radio show, shut up and let everybody talk here. So I'll take Maria's advice, and I didn't mean to turn it into the show, but I did want to ask you about that question, because it's frustrating for us. You see the president up there saying, hey, it's up under my administration. And I saw Jim Inhofe, your buddy, from Oklahoma, and he's very excited about your candidacy. I don't know if he told you that yet, but he is. And he said to me, you sit next to Barbara Boxer at the State of the Union, and she's smiling the whole time he's saying all that stuff. And he's, like, see, Jim, we got this issue from you. And then the last line was something about, we have some green agenda line that she goes, gotcha. That's what Barbara Boxer said to Jim Inhofe. He told me that in Washington, D.C. So I get a little spun up about it, but I will shut up. It does make a difference. And David Grubb is the president of the Bank of Tioga. Been here a long time. And the very first place that after I met David Tormson, was going to shut his radio station off because he had to do temporary housing and make room, get the tower down, called me and said, I like your radio show, but not enough to keep this going because I can take 80 of these RV spots and sell them for $1,000 a month, so see you later, Scott. And the tower's going away, buddy. And I said, well, I hope in a good old-fashioned American way, can we do both? And so we are. We're building a new tower this spring and going to put it on, but I couldn't do it without a banker. So my partner, Gary Emmett, who's your chairman of the campaign, and I walked in to see Dave Grubb, and we're on the radio today serving the Bakken, Williston, to Minot because of this guy in that bank. But, he's got regulators breathing down his throat. He's got fees going up. He's got everything else, and it's tough to lend money. They've got money to lend. That's what his commercials say on the radio. We've got money to lend. Come see us, but it's a tough environment. I just want you to share a little bit of that, David, Senator.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks so much for being here, Senator. Real honor. You touched on Dodd-Frank a little bit already, and Dodd-Frank is just really Dodd-Frank is really punitive legislation. In my opinion, it didn't do much to resolve the too big to fail issue, but it certainly trickled down on a relative scale. It has a huge impact on community banks in terms of increased expense, lots of uncertainty, and a lot of burden dealing with regulations. So I'm very glad to hear that you're open to look at overhauling that legislation, if not repealing it. So that's the really big issue of the day for community banks, and quite frankly, this kind of environment is resulting in a lot of smaller banks contemplating their futures and thinking about getting out of business, which I think is the wrong direction to go. Your comments?
Well, I think you'll find that what happened with Dodd-Frank is typical, which is they go out and say, well, we have this too big to fail. We have these banks that need to have much more oversight, and we have much more government regulation, which, of course, the big banks hate, but they don't hate as much as you think they would. Why? Because, well, Dodd-Frank was intended to provide a whole new regulatory scheme for big banks, but was supposed to be optional for smaller banks. Well, of course, regulators aren't going to have two sets of books or two sets of regulations, if you will. They're going to apply. What's happened is they've applied pretty much all of the Dodd-Frank regulations to all the banks, which is what I suspect the big banks were counting on all along, which they know simply will put a lot of small banks out of business because of the compliance cost of trying to deal with this very heavily regulatory environment. And of course, big businesses and big banks. I always say this, that conservatives and Republicans are not the party of big business, they're the party of small business. Big businesses, big corporations, big banks love big government because it makes them much more competitive vis-a-vis the folks that are nipping at their heels with the small banks or the small businesses, because they simply can't afford to handle the regulatory burden that the government has put on them. And so when you're a big company, you just hire another lawyer or another auditor or another accountant in your compliance office. Whereas if you're the mortgage banker, now you're spending. I had one mortgage banker who said he's spending, prior to Dodd-Frank, he was spending 30 minutes a week. Now he spends 3 hours a day on compliance, and he's getting out of business. He's just not worth it. And I'm hearing this from small bankers, and the same thing. It's just you can't be small and have the level of government compliance that's out there. And as a result, they're eliminating the competition. And so that's why I always say, big likes big. And that's why it's not as easy as you would think. When people say, oh, why is Obama still raising tons of money from Wall Street? Why is he raising tons of money from all these corporations? Big likes big.
And by the way, it goes for oil companies. Those bigger oil companies, they don't mind the regulations, do they? They can do it. Get the phone to Mark, the microphone to Mark Schmidt. Mark is both a farmer and also a school board member, and I think, we forget there's a great agriculture. Come on over and grab it, sure, Mark. And, farms, some big agriculture community out there selling a lot of Case IH down at Stanley Equipment. They pull a lot, and they battle with the John Deere guy, and they put a lot out there. And he's also on the school board, and a good example of the good stock and work ethic here. So go ahead and ask your question, Peter.
Thank you for coming today, Senator. Regulations, EPA, dust regulations, Farm Bill. What can you tell me? What would you do?
Well, that's one of those regulations that we would be repealing. So, the Farm Bill, look, I spent 10 years on the Ag Committee. That's not a very common thing for a United States Senator from Pennsylvania to do. I was the first Pennsylvanian on the Ag Committee in 100 years, Pennsylvania Senator. But Ag's big business in my state, and it was actually happened to be in the area of the state that elected me, so I thought I'd pay a little bit more attention to what was going on in rural areas. And so I know a fair amount about Ag, and my feeling has always been that we have to move agriculture away from government support programs and government management and some of these, I think, overzealous conservation programs like CRP, which I'm not a big fan of, and that we need to get a marketplace for food. And we had a cheap food policy in America. We were doing everything we could to try to keep those prices down and not create the kind of markets that could and should be available. With free trade agreements and with now alternative uses for a lot of the crops that are out there, so obviously corn being first among them, we're moving toward more of a marketplace in agriculture. And I think that's a good thing. And I think the role of the government should be to assist in risk management to make sure that farmers have the proper risk management tools, because it is unique. Farmers have a unique challenge because of the vagaries of weather and other types of conditions that are different than other types of businesses. And of course, food is sort of an essential element for a society. And so having some government involvement, and I say some, and I mean a lot less than we've had historically, in making sure that farmers have risk management tools to be able to deal with the problems that they confront that are unique, to me, is the way to go in the future.
Would you bring the microphone over to the sheriff? There's a lot of impacts going on with everything going on. I'd love for you to hear from the sheriff about what's happening, and then Ward, if you could, from the standpoint of Williston, just the impacts on these towns and what's happening. I mean, Williston is the smallest metropolitan city in North Dakota, as an example, but the largest tax generator. Smokes Fargo in tax revenue right now. Yeah, there's a ton of impacts as a result of it, as the Montiel County Sheriff can tell us. Go ahead.
I really don't know where to start because we have so many. One of them is that we don't have the housing, which you hear a lot about. We don't have the officers, which we definitely need. If we do get the officers, we have no place to put them. It just continues and continues. It's like stepping outside of our courthouse and going to Disneyland because all the license plates are from all over the United States. You don't know who you're dealing with. We've got a bunch of young officers working for us. We hope they'll stick around at least through the 6-month probation. But we are overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. What we're working with is a courthouse that was built in 1914. And basically, we have a 12-bed jail that you could get into the Holiday Inn easier on the weekend than you can get into my jail. And with that, I've got officers on the road hauling prisoners to the adjacent counties, trying to find a place to house them. We spoke of Williston just a second ago. Williston has a facility, a new facility, a nice facility, but that's getting to the point where it's starting to fill up. And we don't always get a chance to get into Williston like we'd like to. If we house a woman, it ties up 1/4 of our jail. Now, on a busy night, basically, we can't afford to have that. So we have to put her on the road with a matron and a deputy, which ties up a couple of my work people. So basically, what we're looking for, any type of relief we can get to be able to keep competitive, because basically law enforcement is a competitive field. We have to keep up. We have to have our people feel safe in their homes, and they have to feel safe on the highway. We get a lot of letters from individuals that are used to just walking to their mailbox out in the rural area. They won't do that anymore because of the trucks, because of the dust, because of the people that are out more or less scanning the area, for lack of better terminology. And we have people out there that we don't know. We used to say, well, that was John Jones, and we knew John was just going down to the post office or whatever. Don't worry about John. But we don't know who John Jones is anymore. We have all kinds of people that are in our area, and they bring luggage with them, folks. They bring a lot of luggage, and that luggage is not always clean. We're the ones that find it out, and hopefully we don't find it out too late. Thank you.
Maybe just to Mayor Kozer and Vicki real quickly, if we could, just to brief up on what you're dealing with.
Sure. Scott, one thing that's been in my mind, and I was sitting here thinking about, on Monday of this week, I was interviewed by a reporter from a German newspaper who's in Williston, and I'm saying, well, how do you get to Williston? And it's quite interesting. Her response was, in Germany, we're looking at what you're doing in northwest North Dakota is going to do for the U.S. economy. And I thought that's quite interesting. We don't ever hear that from Washington, is what's happening here. And so just a kind of a side view, just more a comment than a question. We have huge impacts in our city. It's already been said, and we're not going to go any further down the road. But the thing that would help us the most, it was mentioned before by Jeff and some others, is if we could get rid of the uncertainty. I've been in Williston since the 70s, went through an oil boom and the bust, and we recognize the challenges that come with that. But what we really need is to take some of that risk out of there. And we always tell people there's two things that can change this oil play. One is the price of crude, which we don't think is going to happen, but the other one is the federal government. We don't have a lot of confidence in them, that they use much common sense. And so we recognize that as they make rules and regulations that impact us, that's probably the biggest thing. And we need to get rid of that uncertainty because, as Jeff has said, if we want people to come and build houses, for an example, which is a huge need for us, they need to believe that oil play is going to stay there. The resource is going to be there. We know that. It's a great resource. It's a great quality. It's a great quantity. So that's been dealt with. It's just this federal government. So, I just want to add something that hasn't been said before. I've been one of those Republicans that was undecided until today as to who should I support in this. And I really appreciate what I'm hearing from you, Senator. And I think a lot of people in this part of the country will really resonate with that. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. I wish I could have come to your town last night, but you didn't have any hotel
Thank you, Senator, for coming, and I feel bad. I think I took that room.
We needed about 4 or 5. So.
Okay, I got the marquee for 179, so I did get that. One of the things I hope can happen is that we would have an energy policy, and perhaps that would lower that uncertainty. And then also, we haven't had a transportation bill forever, and we've got a stretch of highway that's pretty dangerous, and we need some federal aid for it, and it's a major oil field corridor, Highway 85, and we've got Highway 23, and we've got some other ones. But if there's any way you could recognize a small state, a small rural state, and the contribution they make to national security by developing their natural resources, you have other states that don't want to do that, not in my backyard. But North Dakota steps forward and says, we'll change our quality of life, we will make a sacrifice because we are a very patriotic state, and we're very proud that we produce oil here. And why can't the federal government recognize that in some of their programs and incentivize that and say, if you produce natural resources, then maybe you get more highway funding, maybe you get more protection on some other levels. So just some thoughts.
Well, I mean, the highways you just talked about would really fit in with sort of my vision for what we should be using highway dollars for. I mean, it should be commerce driven, and that's what. And you know, we have. I can tell you in our state that the major arteries in our state are in a deplorable situation. They always are. I mean, we get, we just get a huge amount of truck traffic going through our state, and we have lots of bridges and lots of freezing and thawing and lots of. I mean, it's always a challenge to upgrade and maintain our roads. So it is, from my perspective, that's the role of the federal government. And if we took all of the resources that went for umpteen other purposes in the highway bill, you go and look at this transportation bill, you're going to see categories of funding for everything you can possibly imagine that have nothing to do with interstate commerce. Nothing. And I really believe that's the principal role. And so that's what we're going to advocate for. That's what we're going to try. And if that's the case, then these kinds of roads are going to be key corridors. They're going to get lots of federal help and support. I'm not too sure you need to tie it to energy or that. Oh, that's an interesting idea I had not heard before. But if you can get back to the basics, I think you're going to be fine in that regard.
Your host today, I just want to give a quick thank you. Tioga has hosted us. We're unfortunately out of time for questions, but wanted to get to more of everybody. But I just want to make sure you acknowledge the mayor, who was on the phone with us and said, what do we got to do? Let's make this happen. Nathan, thank you very much. The president of the chamber, David Papineau, is Papineau Insurance, expanding a company that's been in Tioga for how long?
Over 50 years.
50 years and growing like a weed because of what's happening out here right now, getting into oil field services. And Dwayne Johnson, where's Dwayne? Yeah, Dwayne right there. You're hosted the school today. Their hearts are heavy, as you know, and we appreciate very much that you're hosting the school. I know there's a lot of impacts there as well. Stanley, I guess what is Stanley would be the metropolis, and then Tioga would be the suburb. So they were Christy Trulson. There was Christy from the Stanley Commercial Club, the Chamber, Dennis Lindahl. They made this happen and got us today. So I just want to make sure that they knew that. Target Logistics, Travis is buying everybody lunch. Gosh, what a guy. Senator's got to go do. This is amazing. He's going to go do a photo shoot for Time Magazine. You're going to see this man on the cover of Time Magazine, and the picture is going to be taken at Target Logistics in Tioga, North Dakota. Is that great or what? So while he's doing that, we're going to have lunch. He'll come by quick and say go, and then we've got to go on the tour and then off to the high school. So anything you want to say in closing, Senator?
Just thank you, Richard. I really appreciate that. I hope you realize, how important you folks really are. I mean, to this, and I love what you had to say about stepping forward and doing what's necessary for the country. The country does need you, and I know you're feeling underappreciated. You certainly should be by this administration because they don't appreciate what's going on here. They're not doing the things that are necessary to help you, help this country. And let me assure you that we will. And hopefully, within a year, we'll get a chance to come back up here to North Dakota in a little different. May have a few more people with me. I probably won't be dressed like this, but but I look forward to coming back here and seeing this place bigger and better than ever.
Now we're talking Air Force One in Tioga. There we go. God bless y'all. Thanks so much. Enjoy lunch.